All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the incredibly dramatic, honestly, kind of bizarre, and absolutely historic origins of the world's biggest sporting event. We're traveling back in time to analyze the very first FIFA World Cup final, played between two fierce South American rivals, Uruguay and Argentina. We're going to see exactly how a single match set the template for nearly a century of global football fever. So, get comfortable, and let's jump straight into the fascinating history of the 1930 World Cup final. I mean, just imagine showing up to a World Cup final 6 whole hours early and on a Wednesday, no less, because, well, that is exactly what happened on July 30, 1930. The anticipation for this game was astronomically high. The stadium gates actually swung open at 8 a.m. for a match that wasn't even scheduled to kick off until the afternoon. And, here's a really fantastic piece of trivia. This is literally one of only 2 World Cup finals in history to not be played on a Sunday. The other was the '66 final, which was on a Saturday. Just picture the sheer dedication of those fans, taking a random Wednesday off, arriving at dawn just to lock down their spot.
And speaking of locking down a spot, 68,346. That was the official recorded attendance for this monumental clash. But here's the catch. The venue, the iconic Estadio Centenario in Montevideo, actually had an official capacity of 93,000. And according to historical accounts, the stadium was completely packed to the absolute brim by noon. Think about that. The atmosphere must have been absolutely electric, vibrating with the energy of tens of thousands of local supporters and traveling fans who literally crossed the Rio de la Plata just to witness history in the making.
All right, moving into our first main point, the fierce Olympic rematch. Leading into this final, these two titans were perfectly matched. It's almost like a mirror image. Both Uruguay and Argentina faced off against some formidable semifinal opponents, Yugoslavia and the USA, and both South American giants absolutely steamrolled them with identical, staggering 6-1 victories. They were undisputedly the two best teams in the tournament. This made the final a highly anticipated rematch of the 1928 Olympic gold medal match, which Uruguay had previously won. So the stage was perfectly set for an epic showdown between absolute equals. But wait, before we even get to the kickoff, we've got to talk about the guy leading the host nation. 31. That wasn't a player's jersey number. That was the actual age of Uruguay's manager Alberto Supici. Think about that for a second. At just 31 years old, he's entrusted with the immense, heavy pressure of guiding the host nation to victory in the inaugural World Cup. And the really crazy part? By securing the victory we're about to dive into, Supici set a remarkable record as the youngest ever World Cup winning coach. It's a record that, amazingly, still stands today, nearly a whole century later. Which brings us to a really quirky chapter, the Battle of the Balls. So picture this. There was a major, heated disagreement over a seemingly simple piece of equipment, the match ball itself. Both Uruguay and Argentina absolutely insisted on using their own domestically manufactured ball. Neither side would budge even an inch. And this tension seriously threatened to derail the whole shebang. So how do you solve that? Well, FIFA stepped in with a pretty brilliant diplomatic compromise. They decided that Argentina would provide the ball for the first 45 minutes, and Uruguay would get to provide their own ball for the final 45 minutes. A perfect split, making sure both nations felt like their terms were met.
And that perfectly sets up our next section, a tale of two halves.
Officiated by Belgian referee John Langenis, this grueling 90-minute battle kicked off. The first half was played, and remember this part, with Argentina's ball. But the hosts struck first. Just 12 minutes in, Pablo Dorado put Uruguay in the lead. The Argentines, though, playing with their preferred ball, were just relentless. Only 8 minutes later, at the 20-minute mark, winger Carlos Pocel fired a powerful shot past the Uruguayan keeper to tie it up. Then, in the 37th minute, Guillermo Stabile, who, fun fact, would actually finish as the entire tournament's top scorer, found the back of the net, putting Argentina ahead 2-1. As the whistle blew for halftime, the visitors had totally silenced that massive Montevideo crowd.
But then comes the second half. The teams switch to Uruguay's ball, and wow, the momentum just completely shifts. 12 minutes in, boom. The 57th minute, Pedro Saya equalizes for the hosts. The crowd is instantly back in it. Then, at the 68th minute, Santos Iriarte scores, vaulting Uruguay back into the lead. Argentina fought desperately to get back in the game, but with literally 1 minute left on the clock in the 89th minute, Hector Castro scored the final, decisive goal. Uruguay mounted this massive, unstoppable comeback with 3 unanswered goals to secure a historic 4-2 victory.
Which leads us directly into the immediate aftermath, trophies, holidays, and riots.
Let's start with a moment of pure triumph.
FIFA President Jules Rimet personally awarded the World Cup trophy to the victorious Uruguayan squad. This was a profoundly symbolic moment. I mean, the golden trophy he won over that day would eventually be officially named the Jules Rimet Trophy in his honor, and it served as the ultimate prize in global football for decades to come. Against all odds, Uruguay had successfully defended their status as the absolute best in the world, adding a World Cup to their Olympic gold.
Now, the fallout from the match was basically night and day, depending on where you were. The very next day in Montevideo, the government went ahead and declared a national holiday. The entire country was in a state of absolute jubilation. Conversely, though, the reaction over in Argentina was furious. In Buenos Aires, an angry mob actually gathered and threw stones at the Uruguayan consulate. The emotional pendulum swung from pure ecstasy in one nation to bitter outrage in the other. It really just proves how much this brand new tournament already meant to the people.
To bring a bit of a human element to all this history, let's look at the last surviving players from each side of this epic clash. Ernesto Mascheroni, who was the last living Uruguayan to have played in that final, passed away on July 3, 1984, at the age of 76. And on the Argentinian side, forward Francisco Varallo lived an incredibly long life, carrying the memory of that 1930 final with him until he passed away on August 30, 2010, at the remarkable age of 100. Through these men, the living memory of the very first World Cup final actually endured well into the 21st century.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. We started with this quirky, intense match where teams are literally arguing over which ball to use, playing in a stadium that opened its gates 6 hours early on a random Wednesday. Today, the World Cup is a multi-billion-dollar global mega event broadcast to billions of people. It's just wild how those 90 minutes in Montevideo laid the concrete foundation for the world's biggest sporting spectacle. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder. From a single 1930 match to today's massive scale, what is the World Cup going to look like by 2026 and beyond? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you found these insights as fascinating as I did. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.